Hello, everybody. Welcome to the American Academy of Emergency Medicine Women in Medicine section, the IMG Student Webinar Mentoring Series that is jointly provided with the Osteopathic Medical Student Sessions. Today's session is about crushing interviews. So my name is Tori Odettunde, and I am a current fourth year IMG medical student.
My name is Jordan. I'm also a fourth year medical student at IMG.
Hey y'all, I'm Katie. I am a current third year at a DO school. So nice to see everyone.
Awesome. So the three of us will be moderating tonight's session, mainly Jordan and Katie. I'll be moderating the chat for you guys along with Zoe, one of our other leaders. So today's session is going to be recorded and it's going to be uploaded to the AAEM Women in Medicine website within about a week. And tonight's session is meant to be interactive. So make sure you guys, use the chat box, make sure, you raise your hand to ask questions. We want to hear from you guys. We're all trying to help ourselves. I am so happily, selfishly doing this as well as someone who's trying to navigate this interview series. So I hope that you guys, use this as a tool and ask all the questions that you want. Just to start it off, I'm curious to where everybody's coming from. So if you can now, just tell us the city and state that you're coming from in the chat box, and let's see where we're all at.
This is awesome to see so many people here. I am sure there are a lot of fourth years or potentially like transitional year students. And so I think this will be amazing information for everyone on here.
I also love to see that there's so many of us in New York City right now.
But we're international, y'all. We got Canada in here. We got Sudan. That's exciting. I'm so happy that you guys can tune in. And we really hope that this is, helpful for everybody. So before I introduce the panelists, I think it's important that we all kind of take a deep breath. I know that this is a very, very stressful period, but again, we are okay. We're going to be EM doctors. It's going to happen, okay? We just need to relax. Whether you have no interviews or you have 20, everything is going to work out. You are going to get those interviews and you're going to use sessions like today to prepare yourself to be ready. So everybody relax, we're okay, and we're going to make the most of this session today. So today I do have the honor of introducing our panelists. We are waiting on one, but we do have Dr. Molly O'Neill here. She is a PGY1 and her hobbies include trying to cook new foods, camping, and meeting all of her co-interns' dogs. And scrolling through TikTok and thrifting. If you can just come on and wave and say a little hello for us, Dr. O'Neill.
It's still so weird to hear like doctor and my name together. Like it feels unnatural. But hi guys, I appreciate you tuning in, listening. So I'm calling in from Western PA. I go to Conemaugh, which is a level 1 trauma center in Johnstown. And I went through this whole process, like this time last year, and I know it's super nerve-wracking, and hopefully I'll have some tips for things that'll help you out. So I'm excited.
Awesome, thank you so much. And we also have Dr. Jacqueline Floyd. She is here. She is a PGY2, just coming off mat leave. So her hobbies include taking care of her baby, rightfully so, and spending time with her husband and watching some television. Thank you for being here with us, Dr. Floyd.
Yeah, I know how stressful this time period is, and I would just want everyone to stay positive, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I think once you're kind of on the other side of things and you have students rotating with you, which you will all be doing so shortly, it seems like it's so far away, but it is literally around the corner. You kind of just have a totally different perspective, and I promise all of you just relax. As long as you're normal and you show up on time and you do the basic things, like you're gonna get a spot. You're gonna be a doctor very soon. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So I'm going to turn it over to my other moderators to start off the questions. And again, make sure that you guys put some things in the chat. We'll be watching it and we'll be asking those questions as well.
Okay. Hi, everyone again. So I know I have a lot of questions. I don't know about you guys. Like, as Tori was saying, this is very unknown. It's unknown territory. But I wanted to start off by asking just kind of like what your guys' overall application strategy was. Like, how many programs did you apply to? Did you have like a backup specialty, or was it specifically just emergency medicine?
Yeah, I'll go first. I applied to, I think, 138 programs, 16 of which were internal medicine. I had really high scores, but if my thinking was like, if I was going to end up in a backup specialty, I wanted to at least have kind of like a say over the location, hopefully. And I ended up getting quite a bit of EM interviews. And I attended 2 IM interviews and just kind of ended up feeling like a fraud. They're like, why do you want IM? And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't, but I ended up canceling the rest because I just couldn't do it. And I felt comfortable with my EM amount. I'm sure I would have stuffed it up if I was uncomfortable with the amount of interviews I had, but that was my strategy. And I think everybody has a different one. So that's one thing I want to say too. If anything me or Molly say doesn't resonate with you today, like, we're all individuals and I don't want this to stress you guys out. We are only here to give you advice and just what we did, but we are not the end all be all. There's plenty of different opinions out there. Okay. So you have to do what you feel comfortable with and what makes you happy. This is just one say of things. I was like paranoid. I wanted to be on the absolute safest side of things. So I applied very broadly and to a backup,
Yeah. And so I dual applied too. So for context, something that was important to me was location. My family home base is in Maryland. And so I really wanted to try to stay East Coast if I could. I'm a DO student. I only took ComLex, and I was not a stellar student by any means. I got sub 500s on level 1 and level 2, just, for full disclosure. And so I think I ended up putting out like 56 emergency medicine applications. And then I did 10 family medicine. And as the EM1s were coming in, I decided to cancel some of the family med ones. So my kind of idea was, emergency medicine was the goal totally, but I also have a lot of interest in practicing in like rural medicine. And so in a lot of rural places, a lot of the docs in the EDs are like family or IM trained. And so I knew I would still be able to pursue that. But EM had my heart. So that's what I was really like rooting for.
So I only know this from like the IMG standpoint, but like most of our schools pretty much tell us that we should be applying to like a ton of programs, like well over 100 programs. Do you guys get that same advice as a DO student too? Or do they kind of just let you do whatever you want or whatever you feel like doing?
Yeah, I think it was kind of individual. But for the most part, I feel like at least my school, my dean encouraged me to apply to 60 emergency medicine programs last year. But I know I've heard of people applying to literally all the programs. And then one of the third years in my class currently, I think she applied to 10 programs. And so it really just depends.
So I'm curious too, because I actually have my first residency meeting tomorrow. And I have heard that I think traditionally from a DO standpoint, they recommend dual applying kind of like across the board. And so I'm kind of curious, was that, and even from like the IMG perspective, is that more recommended just in terms of like match rate, or what was the thought process behind that?
I think at least at my school, the DO school, they were very, always have a backup plan, try to have, something in line for if, your desired specialty doesn't work out. So I feel like that was very encouraged. So.
Yeah, as an IMG, for sure, encouraged to have a backup plan. And I think from my standpoint, I just felt more comfortable with it as well. But I know some people that I ended up in residency with that didn't apply, and they said, I would literally have rather not been a doctor than not done EM. For me, that's just not true. Like, I enjoyed a lot of rotations. EM was definitely where my heart was, but I would have been fine if I matched in something else. And I think that's just a personal choice. If you would be fine in something else, then it's nice to just have some other interviews come in, I think, for peace of mind. But if you're like, no, absolutely not, that's not what I want to do, that's fine too. You just know that you have a better chance of ending up in the SOAP with programs that are maybe a little bit less desirable. But I know a lot of you guys already applied and are probably getting interviews. I know there's a couple of third years on here, so that application strategy is a little bit more for you. One thing I wanted to add in is just that I did apply to 130, like I said, and then I ended up getting a lot of interviews early from places that were a little bit less desirable for me. And a lot of my late interviews were places that I really did want more. And I would say this, if you ask yourself, like when it comes to ranking time, I didn't even know this, you can only rank 20 programs or you start to have to pay more money. And so when you're dual applying, like that includes both of those specialties. And so if you like, this is a really bad example. I'm sorry if anyone's from Michigan. I accepted an interview from Central Michigan early on. I'm from California. Michigan is just like at the very bottom of my list, right? Like I'm not interested. I have no family there. I took the interview, and I took an interview from somebody who probably actually maybe is from Michigan or likes that area. And I literally didn't even end up ranking it, because at the end of the day, I asked myself, would I want to be here, or would I be literally miserable? And I would have been miserable. So I didn't rank it. I really ask yourself that question before you accept an interview from somewhere, unless you're really not in a comfortable interview range, because I totally get that. I would probably have rather been in Central Michigan than nowhere, but I had a comfortable, I was above that 12 number. How many interviews should we aim to be comfortable? They say 12 is the number. As an IMG, I did 20. I'll be honest with you guys, because like I said, it's just as an IMG, you're just so nervous. And I know some, US MDs that were like, I can't believe that's so selfish, but it's like, listen, as an IMG, you got to do what's best for you, but I do wish that some of those early interviews at places I really didn't like, I wouldn't have taken an interview from somebody else. So just ask yourself that, like, would I be miserable at this place? Decline if you feel like you would.
That's good to know, because I feel like it's also kind of hard to gauge, because in the beginning you're like, well, how many interviews am I going to get? Do I want to turn this down, even though it may be at the bottom of the list? So that's something to definitely consider, but I feel like that makes me nervous. I don't know about anyone else, but it makes me nervous.
No, 100%. And I think one thing to do potentially to avoid that is, for those early ones, if they give you a bunch of options, pick a later date. And then if at that later date, you don't have enough interviews that you're comfortable, attend it. And if you do have plenty of interviews, then they can find somebody last minute. Trust me, they'll find someone to take the interview, but for you, then you have that kind of choice.
Okay. So my next question for you guys is, like, how do you prepare for these interviews? Like, did you guys use a certain system or program for like mock interviews, or did you practice with friends? Like, how do you guys go about being able to prepare for these interviews?
Molly, I don't know if you want to take this one. I feel like I've talked a lot right now.
No, you're fine. I was trying to figure out my mute button. But I think if I remember correctly, they had a like big interview sort of option, something like that with my school. I don't think I did that, but I did a mock interview with someone at like the counseling service that my school offers. But I think if you get down, like if you're going to prepare anything for interviews, I would do the tell me about yourself, and then get down why emergency medicine, and try to get it like as concise. And you don't want to sound, super robotic and rehearsed, but I think if you give those questions some thought beforehand, you'll have the confidence, so you're not kind of, like scrambling to figure out what you want to say. And so for the tell me about yourself, like that's general, like first question. So the way I did it, and everyone's different, you can have your own approach, but I kind of would say like, hi, my name's Molly. Like I was born in China. I was adopted. I grew up in Laurel, Maryland. I went to Towson for undergrad and studied biology. I went to WVSOM, and then I would go and talk a little bit about like personal interests and goals, and then professionally what I would want to do. And just, kind of like real quick and dirty, like boom, boom, boom. These are kind of things like little teasers for if they want to ask more, like in the interview later. So I'd get that down, and then why emergency medicine. But everything else, like a lot of the interviews were so relaxed, and they really just ask questions off of your application. So I wouldn't prepare too much, just probably those things.
I agree. And I think this really, really helped me. Especially for some of those really early morning ones that there was like a time difference. I remember being really tired. I typed out responses to tell me about yourself, that a time I failed, why emergency medicine, strengths and weaknesses. By far, she's right. The two that were asked at every single interview was tell me about yourself and why emergency medicine. but I did get asked the time I failed too. Just like either question that you think would be hard for you to come up with something on the spot, or those two hot ones that are going to be asked every single time. I would type it out, because especially if you're on Zoom, I actually was able to have it in the corner of my screen. And so I was able to like talk. And if I got too nervous, just kind of like glance over at what I wanted to say. And I feel like that did help me, especially on those early ones where I was really nervous. So I suggest doing that. And then I practiced saying those out loud with my husband prior. And I think that was also very helpful, because a little bit, it sounds, like robotic, but then you'll kind of get into the flow of things.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We have some questions in the chat, I think more about timing with interviews. So someone has asked, is it better to interview at our higher preferred programs later or earlier on? Because lots of interview spots fill up fast. And I'm assuming that this is if you get one of your preferred programs early as opposed to later. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say like middle, honestly, is probably the best, because early you haven't really had time to practice, and late you kind of get interview fatigue. So I would say if it's one of your like maybe 4th through 8th interviews, those were probably my best interviews if I had to look back.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think so early on, you're kind of working out the kinks on how to use Zoom and all these other like WebEx and other platforms that these programs are using. Trying to figure out those things. And then like later on, Zoom fatigue is like totally real. So when I ended up doing a lot of my interviews in January, just because I wasn't really sure like how much was going to come in. And I was just so burnt out at that time, where I was just kind of like, I don't even care. Or not that I didn't care anymore, but I was really tired. And so if you are able to hit some of the ones that you are like really, really excited about, and, like October, November time, I feel like that'd be kind of ideal.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question. It said, did you reach out to the programs personally for some of those late interviews? And when would you suggest emailing programs personally? I know obviously from this standpoint, don't reach out to anyone now. We're still very much in this process, but at what point in the cycle, if you haven't heard from your favorite programs, are you saying, hey, let me reach out to them?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have heard of a few of them, but I know that there are some kind of uniform dates, and I don't know why one is sticking out in my mind is like October 14th for my year. So maybe it's a little bit later for you guys. Maybe it's like this Friday.
It's the 19th, I think.
The
18th
19th.
Or 19th, something like that. Yeah.
So like that day, like when I didn't get interviews from some of the programs that I was more interested in, or that I had like a obvious kind of connection to, then I did reach out to the PDs, and explain my connection. Like, hey, my grandma lives in this city and I really want to be close to my family. I think I'd be a great fit for your program because of X, Y, and Z. I'd love if you could take another look at my application. Short, they're not going to read a long email, and explicitly state why you would be really interested in their program, because programs really want people that have a connection to their program and that want to be there. My PD says that all the time. We want people who want to be here. If you can prove that you really want to be here, like, and we believe you, like, you're going to get an interview, and you're probably going to get ranked highly if you're one of our med students. So that's like the very first line that you should put, is why you have a connection to that program. And I did get quite a few interviews from those emails. So I know some people say like, oh, they can find it annoying, but if you haven't gotten an interview already, then it's probably worth reaching out.
Yeah, I think so when I applied, I only had one flow, that was already uploaded. And then I finished my second audition, is the program that I'm at right now at Conemaugh. And that didn't finish until the end of October. And so when that flow was uploaded, I kind of used that at a time where if programs didn't send me an interview invite at that point, I would send a quick, hey, I just wanted to let you know that I updated my application. I have a second flow in there, and then I'm interested in your program because, and then just like Jacqueline said, so I would include one like professional reason why I felt like their program was appealing to me, whether they have like a tract or just anything kind of like in the realm of like the program specifically. And then I would do another point for why I feel like I would thrive in that area. Because a lot of PDs, they want to see that you're going to be happy where you end up matching. And so whether that be like a family tie or, this is really appealing to me, the like city feel or whatever it is, just to kind of have, keep it short, but then those two components.
And more just on this stuff too, another question that's in the chat. So with reaching out to programs, like, is it okay to reach out if you were rejected and try to figure out why, or should you just kind of leave it at the rejection?
I think that's a personal question, but I personally wouldn't feel comfortable asking why I was rejected. I don't think it's going to change their mind. And I don't know that they would take the time to email you back. But that's just my thoughts on it. I think if it really bothers you and it was your number one choice or something, there's really no harm in asking why, right? Because they already rejected you. So
I think another thing too that was kind of surprising when I was going through this last year was how many programs will ghost you. Like, we spent all this money and put out all these applications, and out of all of them, like at least for the emergency medicine, actually for all of the applications that I had, I only got one actual rejection email. Everyone was just like, well, I'm just gonna wait and guess and see, maybe I'll get a last minute invite. But I think that's a kind of situation where maybe after match, if you're still trying to figure out your next plans, then maybe reach out to see if there's anything that you could do better, like specifically like if you are really interested in that particular program. But
so going off of rejections, I'm just personally curious. So the programs that, for instance, are on the unified interview release date. So say, you apply to a handful of those programs and you don't get an interview on that date. Does that mean that essentially you are rejected? Or because if they are kind of ghosting you, or could you potentially, not if you reach out to them, but could they also kind of offer a second round of interviews? How does that work? Or y'all might not even know, but I'm just curious.
Definitely you can get a second round. I got most of my California interviews in December or January, which obviously freaked me out because I really wanted California. But and I did reach out to quite a few of those programs with explaining why I had a connection. But I know that multiple of those programs were on those unified release date. And I did get some rejections, and obviously I didn't reach out to like I said, I don't really think it would have been helpful, but for some of the other programs that I did get an interview later on, they were on that unified release date. And the other thing I wanted to say with reaching out is that not just an email to the PD, I was on a different rotation I'm just going to give the example, Arrowhead, and I was doing a maternity elective, and that attending was like, oh, I know the ED program director. Oh, you didn't get an interview? And I was like, no. And she offered to reach out for me. And that's 100% the reason I got an interview at Arrowhead. So if you know somebody at that program, if you had another good connection, at a different part of the hospital, or whatever, you guys feel like it's awkward right now, but I'm telling you, I would love to help out somebody from my school who reaches out to me. If they're like, listen, I really want to be at Eisenhower for this reason, I didn't get an interview, and they kind of tell me a little bit about themselves, I would be happy to just ask my program director, hey, did you look at their application? They reached out to me and it sounds like they really want to be here. And I'm telling you, just that little push would totally help. So if you know somebody, do not be shy right now. People want to help you. And even if they're delayed in responding, people are super busy. They might be on an ICU rotation. You don't know what's going on with them, but I'm telling you that now is the time to be bold and to ask those people for help, because everyone wants to help each other out right now.
Thank you. So another question too, because this is on Zoom, and Jacqueline, was your interview on Zoom as well too, or were you in person? You were on Zoom?
Yeah, I was on Zoom.
Okay. So did you guys have a background, a backdrop? Did you guys use a ring light or anything like that just for the perfect image, or how did you guys go about doing that?
No, so some of my interviews I was on away rotations and just in funky areas, and so I think my goals is, as long as I could procure a lamp that would I'm cheap, I wasn't gonna get money on a ring light, but if I could get a lamp and position it to where the light was going in a decent way, and then as long as the background wasn't just super chaotic, I really didn't put too much into that.
Yeah, I just found a completely blank wall behind me. I did see like advice to like put a couple things about yourself behind you, but I didn't want to like narrow myself down to like those few things. I wanted them to pick what was like out of my application that was interesting to them. So I just did totally blank wall. I did have a ring light. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't really know if because I have a backdrop from actually my headshots that I had gotten, and I didn't know if I should put that like behind or if I needed like some form of lighting or if natural lighting was going to be okay. So that's good to know. Do we want to do some questions from the chat?
Hi.
Yes. Actually, no, go. Yeah, someone has a question. Go for it.
So sorry. I just wanted to jump in on Jordan's question. I'm also using kind of like Molly mentioned, Big Interview Medical, and I'm kind of new to it. It's kind of, you're just recording your answers to some questions. I found it kind of weird. I wasn't sure exactly where to look. Did you guys look at the camera to make it look like you're making eye contact, or at like yourself on the screen or the person who's kind of interviewing you? What did you guys do? It was kind of like a weird thing for me, trying to figure out where to point my eyes.
I think wherever you pointed your eyes right now is totally fine. I don't know where you were looking, if you were looking at yourself or the camera, but it looked good. So I would say don't overthink it. Look at the person that's talking to you and you're going to look fine.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
One tip that I saw, I think on Med Twitter, was if you actually minimize the video and make it so that it's just like a tiny box. And then if you only have it like the person talking, and then you put that video like up by your camera, whenever you're looking at the person, it also looks like you're looking at the camera. And it also helps with like Zoom fatigue. If you mark it so that whatever video is on is like the speaker, the person talking. And so that's something that I did that helped a little bit, but.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I know we think we have some questions that might be beyond our scope. Someone had asked, how can someone get a SLO after graduation, especially for foreign IMGs? To my knowledge, getting a SLO, you just have to do the EM rotation. I think you're going to have to find those places that are willing to accept you. Or I'm not sure if they still do the OSLOs. That's beyond me. If anyone knows, I didn't do any of this cycle, but those are the off rotation ones as well. But I think that's kind of just going to take some more personal research just to be able to do those rotations. And then someone said, what do you think of a candidate who did EM boards from another country with a couple years of research experience in the US? Is it possible to still match? So when I get these questions in the chat, I just want to be able to say that like no one here can determine your destiny as to saying that can you match or not. A lot of it is the confidence that you have to say that like I'm very much well equipped to do this. It sounds like you have the experience that you believe that you need to get there. So I'm not sure it'd be fair for any of us to be telling you like, yeah, of course, or no, like it's not for us to say. We're confident that you're going to get it. And you, as long as you share that same confidence, you should be fine as well. And we got a little Zoom tip, no lights or windows with the sun behind you. Okay, nice. I think that's helpful. We definitely need to play around with some lighting.
With the lighting, just if you're at a time where the time changes, I've noticed like if you're relying on natural lighting and like the sun goes down, like during it, it's kind of awkward. And so just be mindful and aware of like the time of day and things like that. And then follow up to that, when you're scheduling your interviews, like triple check that you're like in Eastern Standard or Central or whatever time, because that, like all of my interviews have been on like East Coast. So, but just like for the Zoom, I was like trying to figure out like Central time, okay, what does this mean for me and things like that. So just be very aware of the time and what you're doing.
Okay, we have another question in the chat. We kind of answered, I guess, recommendations on how to prepare for questions. But what are your top questions that you ask programs during interview season? And I think this kind of goes hand in hand, like what did you ask top leadership in terms of the PDs? And then what did you ask, I guess, to the residents themselves?
Yeah, sorry if you guys hear my baby crying in the background, but I think that the reality is that you are probably going to have to make up fake questions a little bit. Like, you're going to be doing all this research on these programs, right? And then like, you should know some of the answers to the questions that you're asking, because otherwise, like, why are you applying and like taking that interview if you don't know that you like the program? But especially to the other faculty members, that was the easiest for me, because I would typically say like, do you enjoy working at this hospital? And like, you know, what's your favorite part of working with residents, something like that, where you're just genuinely asking about, like, you're genuinely curious about their experience, because that's easy for them to answer. And a lot of the faculty that are on there don't actually know program specific questions the way that PDs do. And then for PDs, I kind of focused on the academic portion, because I just found that the easiest to ask about, like didactics and that kind of thing. And I think as long as, at least for me, if I was interviewing, as long as you don't say, no, I have no questions, because then you don't sound that interested, then I would say like one question about something just to show that you're interested is fair. You don't need to make up a bunch of fake questions. Just if you have a lot of questions, that's fine, but you don't need to make up a ton of fake ones, because you're going to have like a 10-minute, 15-minute time limit anyways with that person.
I would say, as current residents, what are questions that would pique your interest if somebody asked you on the interview cycle? Like, what would you be happy to answer? What's something that you would really want to give like an honest answer to?
I think one of my favorite questions to ask as a med student, and I haven't sat through any like meet and greets yet, but I think a question that's very, they can get a lot of like really good information is asking the residents like specifically what their favorite and least favorite off-service rotation was. Because you're going to be in the emergency department for like the majority of your time, but you're also going to have like trauma and OB-GYN and peds and all these other things. And so you really get to have an idea of some of the pros and the cons to the program by asking that kind of information.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And then I also, which I only did this in the meet and greets, I didn't do this in my official interviews, but I asked questions that I genuinely wanted to know. And I will say I got some very surprising answers, like, how is the cafeteria food? How is your guys' lounge? Do you guys get money for food? Is parking paid for? Because that kind of stuff is actually kind of hard to find online. And there were some programs that like you had to pay for parking. Sorry, I don't know if you have to pay for parking, Molly, but you had to pay for parking. Like, you got like $50 a week for food, which at Eisenhower we get like $127 a week for food. We have like priority parking. So, and I had done my audition at Eisenhower, so that was like really shocking to me. And some programs were like, no, we don't get any money for food, that kind of thing. And those things seem like not a big deal, but I was taking that as a representation of like, does this program care about their residents? Because those are just little things like, oh no, our lounge is a little box, like, no, we can't hang out in it, that kind of stuff. That stuff mattered to me when it came down to like the nitty gritty. And I think as a resident, I would be happy to answer, and it would kind of tell me that you had at least kind of been in the EM atmosphere if you asked about like little dynamics like that, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Thank you. I'm kind of taking note of that, because that stuff is actually really important, to be honest. Someone else has asked, when researching residency programs, besides location, what are you looking for in a program? Are you looking at the number of annual ED visits, the number of accepted IMGs or DOs? For your case, Molly, what are you guys like? I guess a lot of the research was done beforehand, but I guess more of the nitty gritty happens before the interview. So what was important to you guys?
I think location was number one for me. And then second to that, I wanted to look at programs that had DOs in their class that, you know, they were familiar with DO students. And then from there, I looked and tried to see if they had, you know, like a trauma level. I think there's pros and cons to a level 1 versus some of the lower trauma settings. And then I have a lot of interest in like not emergency medicine, like EMS and wilderness medicine. And so just looking for opportunities for programs that I feel like I would be able to fulfill some of those interests.
Yeah, I think for me, I honestly didn't have this answer until I went to start making my rank list. Because, you know, when I was like applying, I was like, I just want to match anywhere. Anything will do, you know. But then when I was making my rank list, the number of shifts really mattered to me. Like one program, they worked like 24 shifts a month. And for me, even if it's 8-hour shifts, 24 is a lot. I would rather have a lower number and work longer hours. So that ended up being probably second most important for me after location. And now that I'm working 18 a month, I can say that I feel that was a good decision for myself, because I can't imagine working 24, 21, 24. And then the other thing, I didn't really care much about the annual ED visits, because I didn't really care if it was a smaller site, as long as the residents felt like they were getting well educated. I did care very much whether it was a 4-year or a 3-year program. So those things kind of factored in for me, I think, the most.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, was like, did it affect your decision if it was a 3-year versus a 4-year program? And like, what was your reasoning behind it? Like, just out of curiosity.
I think I primarily looked at 3 years, just because, like, I know there's a lot of pros to doing 4 years, but I think personally for me, I kind of want to get in, do my training, potentially do fellowship, if I decide to do that later. But I kind of wanted to just do that. But when talking to some people about 4 years, some of the perks that I heard to 4-year programs, where like if you are interested in doing a fellowship, it's more appealing for those programs to have a resident that's had 4 years under their belt versus 3. I think some of the 4-year programs, you may work a little bit less shifts, and there may be like specialized tracks. So one of the programs that I was really interested in, they actually had like an EMS, like wilderness medicine track, which was really cool. But when it came down to it too, I ended up ranking the 3-year programs a little higher.
Yeah, this is, again, it's just a totally personal opinion. I'm not super interested in academic medicine. I think if you are, a lot of those programs end up being 4-year programs. But I knew I don't really want to go that road. And so I didn't feel like there was any disadvantage in doing 3 years. And I think the disadvantage of doing 4 years is that you're sacrificing about 200 grand, right? Like 250 grand probably. And for me, it's like, why would I work for free another year, basically, when I could get paid? But I know there's a lot of really good 4-year programs out there too. And so if, you know, I don't think it should be the end all be all, but for me, it factored in at the end of things.
For sure. Thank you. And then did you guys get any like weird questions during your interview? Like, I know sometimes people just ask you some weird questions just to see like what your response is going to be. And then like, if you were kind of thrown off and didn't really know how to respond, like, how did you handle that situation?
Yeah, I remember one specifically that like he really threw me for a loop, like the whole interview. And I think it was intentional. Like, I think he wanted to see, what do you do when someone just throws really random things at you? And I would say just try your best to answer the question. You know, that's what I did. Just you come up with what you can on the spot. And just the biggest thing, honestly, I think that they're looking for is if you stay calm, you know, and answer the question. I don't know that the answer really even mattered to him. It was like, is she going to panic? So.
Yeah, I think just taking a second to kind of collect your thoughts and think about it, and then just go, even if it's like a weird, funky answer to these like oddball questions, just go for it. But yeah, I got asked some like just really strange questions. They were really funny, but like I have no idea.
So we have a question in the chat. So how do you answer a question about other specials you applied to, knowing that you do apply to that hospital? And I think we're getting into the realm of what might be illegal questions. If you guys can kind of touch base on that, because I know there are some topics that are kind of not supposed to be touched during the interview season. So I guess, how would you guys answer that?
I didn't apply to any hospital. I was just a little bit worried about that. But for the illegal part, especially because I kind of already knew I wanted to have a kid in residency, and I was very nervous about asking any questions about that. And anytime another female asked a question about it, I was like, oh my God, thank God she's asking what I'm thinking. Cause I don't want to ask about, like, oh, what's your maternity leave policy? How do you feel if a, person has to take off time? But, and to be honest with you, I don't know that even if I went back, that I would feel comfortable asking those questions. My program handled it miraculously, but I don't know that I would have wanted to disclose that prior. Because I do think realistically that they know that then you're going to be out for a certain amount of time. And I don't want that to factor into their mind at all. But I did not get asked any questions that were illegal during my interview season. So I didn't get put in that uncomfortable situation. Thank gosh.
Yeah, I didn't dual apply to the same hospital. I did get some questions on with some of the other interviews of like, oh, like where else are you interviewing? And then you could in it a lot of times it was residents who are just trying to make small talk that aren't necessarily thinking about the rules. And so I would just say generally like, oh, like I have mainly on my auditions, because some of my auditions I was doing interviews during that time, and they were really accommodating for taking interviews and stuff. But I'd get questions of like, oh, like where did you interview with, and things like that. And occasionally, some of those times there was like interview for family medicine while I was on an EM, or like vice versa, and it was just really awkward. And so I would just say like, oh, it was a program up north or whatever, and try to redirect the conversation a little bit. But I don't think I was asked any like blaringly illegal questions during my interview. So.
Yeah, that's actually one thing I want to touch on in case anyone's still auditioning, because I know there's some October and November still kind of going on. A lot of people asked me, residents, when I was on my auditions, like, so where do you want to end up? What's your number one choice? Which they shouldn't do that, but they're going to. And I would say to keep it as vague as you can if it's not your number one. I truly do believe you should only tell your number one that they're your number one. And I don't think you should hesitate if they are. If you know beyond a shadow of a doubt, like I did know that Eisenhower was going to be my number one, and they are the only program that I told they were my number one. But every other program that I auditioned at asked me. And I would say, oh, I'm really interested in this program because I like this about it. But right now, like, I don't know where all my interviews are going to come from. And I'm just trying to keep my mind open for now, but I'm super interested, and like really try to convey how interested you are in their program, but definitely don't lie to them, because like as a resident, like this EM circle is very small, and there's definitely students that did lie to us. And it's really discouraging when we're trying so hard. Like if you tell me that we're our number one, like we're your number one, and then I try really hard to push for you, I'm like, they really want to end up here. And then we find out that you ranked us low, because we know if you end up at a program 30 minutes around the corner and we ranked you really high, and it's just super awkward. Like we're all going to be working together, and you don't want to burn those bridges, and program directors talk. So I just wouldn't go there. Only tell one program. And if other programs ask, you're super interested, but not number one.
That's really good to know, because I know that does happen to some of us on the rotations. I know it's happened to me, and I just tried to keep it as vague as possible. I have one last question. I don't know if anyone else has a question they want to add into the chat, but I just wanted to know, like, after your guys' interviews, did you send out thank you letters to the programs, or did you just kind of leave it as is?
I did. And I sent it to every person that interviewed me. And I, in the email, I said something specific about their interview. And I made those notes right after the interview, because you're going to be going through so many, you're going to forget like what happened during that interview. So if there was something that we really bonded about, like, I really enjoyed our interview and talking about volleyball. I can't believe you're a volleyball player too. Super interested in your program because of X, Y, and Z. Thank you again for your time. And I think it's important. Unless the program says do not send emails, because a couple do that, but most of the time they don't.
I did some thank you notes. I think for some of the top, maybe like the top 4 or top 5 programs that I was like really, really interested in, I ended up doing thank you notes to each individual person. But I think after a while, I just got so tired that I kind of said to hell with the thank you notes. But I will say that when you are asking questions, a lot of times the opinion questions are gold because you're able to use that information of what they talked about in your thank you note too. So you can say like, hey, in your opinion, what is the strength of your program? Or maybe not that, because I feel like that's kind of like not silly, but kind of standard one. But like opinion questions are really good because then you can talk about like, oh, like thank you for sharing your thoughts on this, blah blah blah. And then I will say after every interview, after I finish out with the Zoom call or whatever, I would take like 5 minutes and I had a running like Google Doc. I would write the name of the program. I would do pros, cons, and then a one-liner. And that was so helpful for me when it came to making my my rank list and everything. Just some general impressions. And then my one-liner at the end, I would say something like note to self, like, this is definitely like top third program. Like, I really like this. I would be happy here. And I was kind of able to use all of my notes and stuff and like my impression when it was fresh from it. Just because you get through and you talk to so many people and everything starts blending together. And so doing something like that, I think would be really helpful.
100%. I did the same thing. I think it's so important. I don't even know if I could have made my rank list without the notes. Honestly, it would have been so hard. And then one other thing I want to say, I just remembered 2 other questions I asked a lot that I think the conversation typically went well after was, how do you feel your relationship is with consultants when you call? Because number one, I think that plays a huge factor into your happiness. If you're constantly calling consultants and they're bashing you and it's a terrible time to try to admit patients, I wouldn't want to be at that program. And I think that it shows them, again, that you've been in the EM setting. We're the only people that have to do that regularly with every single patient, basically. And I think they'll be happy to talk about it. And then I already forgot the other question that I frequently asked, but if I remember it, I will tell you.
While you think on it, we do have some questions in the chat. I had some personal ones as well here. So someone had asked, is it common to take notes during the interview?
I would jot down notes here and there. Like if I had an interest in, I asked, this is another question that I asked, which I think was good for any follow-up to. So I would say like, hey, like I have an interest in EMS in wilderness medicine. Do you have any faculty who are like who have training in this or who share an interest in this? And a lot of times they would say like, oh yeah, like Dr. Joe totally loves like wilderness medicine. And so I would jot down like real quick, like Dr. Joe. And then if I wanted to do like a follow-up email, then I could say like, hey, like it was really great talking to you. Like I'd love to get in touch with Dr. Joe about more information about like the wilderness medicine track, things like that. Just like really quick things. But overall, I would do all my notes like after the interviews.
Yeah, I agree. I would probably wait for most of the notes for afterwards. If there's something very specific that you want to write down, jot it down or jot it down quickly in between the interviews.
Okay, that's helpful. So someone had asked, how do you go about in the interview, I guess, asking questions about the training dynamic to programs that are maybe brand new or corporate run? I guess, how do you kind of approach that? Because again, they haven't really gone through the experience thoroughly.
I don't know for sure that I have a great answer for that, but I will say that when people ask me or when I ask, like, do you feel like this program is preparing you well to be an attending? Like, do you feel like you're getting the training that you need to get? I think everyone's probably going to say yes in an interview setting, but their face might tell you what you need to know for whether or not they feel like they're happy there. So I think that, if the residents feel like they're being well prepared, I think that's a good sign.
Anybody have any more last minute questions? This has been amazing so far. I've written down a bunch of notes this entire time. So thank you guys. But does anybody have any more burning questions? This is the time. Feel free to type it in the chat, unmute yourself.
I actually want to say one more thing too, that I don't think I knew until interview season. It is sort of an expectation that you email at the end of interview season your number one program, letting them know. And I think that it does make, if you're if you're like tied with a couple candidates and you're the one that emails saying how interested you are, and you explicitly write, you're my number one program, I want to let you know that, like I said, don't lie. I think it will make the difference in bumping you up those spots. And so if you don't email them, especially if you're someone that really stood out in their mind, you know, they may notice.
Okay, questions are coming in. We'll do rapid fire. When's the latest date you should wait to schedule an interview prior to ranking?
I did one early February, I think.
Okay. And then someone asked you,
January.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. I think late January was my last one, but I want to say that there was a little bit of time in between, like when their interviews end to when your rank list is due. And so like there is some time to kind of mull over. And I don't remember the name of the app, but there's actually some like a generator kind of thing where you can put in the names of things, like the names of programs and rank. And so it'll compare to, and then you'll say the one that you like. And at the end, it'll give you a rank list. And I did it just for fun because one of my classmates shared it with me. But it ended up being pretty much like spot on to what I ended up like ranking. So I can see if I can try to find it and send it out. I mean, that will be for way later, but.
Okay, someone said, can you be more specific about what the end of interview season is?
I just made sure to do it basically when I sent my rank list and I knew when you know who your number one is going to be, then I think that that's fair. And I would wait because you might have an interview absolutely blow you away, and you might get an interview you're not expecting.
Yeah, definitely. That happened to my sister. Her last interview was the one that she ranked number one, and it was early February. So be prepared for that, which I think is cool. Yeah. So someone asked, who would you send that email for the number one program to? The coordinator, the PD, all the people you interviewed with? Who are you, I guess, kind of targeting with that email?
The PD.
The PD, okay. And then just to reiterate, what are the normal number of interviews recommended based on if you're USMD, DO, IMG, or Visa IMG? I guess you guys kind of spoke about your own experiences, but the lucky number seems to be 12. I think some of us went to AAEM recently, and some of the attendees spoke about like whether you're an IMG, DO, it doesn't really matter. 12, it really is kind of that number. And then after that, you should be confident that you will match. But again, too, as well, even if you have less than that, more than that, like you just, confidence is key. And I'm learning that as I go through this process. As I say it, I'm hearing it back to myself, but confidence is key. The number is not huge as much as it is like you go into every interview and you take advantage of it, every opportunity to kind of just say that like, I'm supposed to be here and I'm ready. So those are my thoughts, personal thoughts.
I think there was a part two to Priscilla's question. She also just said, also, if you have an update, like another SLO that you're adding to your application, who do you send that email to? Is it the program coordinator or the PD?
I'd probably do both.
Both, okay.
Another thing I want to say too, just this is a personal thing again, but when it came down to making my rank list, I'm just going to tell you guys what it was. So Eisenhower was pretty much always my number one. It's in an area that my grandma had a condo. It's near my family. I was like, I want to end up there. And then I ended up getting an interview at Duke. The interview went amazing. I wasn't expecting an interview there as an IMG. I loved the program coordinator. And so I was just like coming down to it. Like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Number one, I already had pigeonholed myself because I told Eisenhower they my number one on my audition rotation. And that's why I'm saying I do recommend holding off. Because I was just like, man, I don't want them to be a liar. Like if I had ended up ranking Duke number one, I probably would have had to message those residents and been like, look, I'm so sorry, but this is what happened. Because I just would have felt that bad about it. But at the end of the day, like my whole family was like, you should rank Duke number one. You definitely should go to Duke. And I think as like a pride thing, I was like, Duke's a great school. I should rank Duke number one. But ask yourself as you're ranking those programs, like if I close my eyes on match day and I open that email and it says Duke, am I going to be sad that I didn't go to Eisenhower? Like, am I going to be sad that that's the choice I made for myself? And if the answer is like, yeah, you'll feel sad inside, I don't think that that's the right choice for you. Like, I don't think you should make your rank list just based off of prestige, just based off ego. I think you should make it genuinely on what is going to make you the happiest on match day and what you're not going to have any regret about. Because I ended up putting Eisenhower number one because I was just like, you know what? I am going to be sad if it doesn't say Eisenhower. Even though maybe Duke sounds better to everybody that I talk to, that's where I want it to be. And I'm happy that I put it as number one. So I just think do what's right for you, you know?
Any last words from you as well, Molly? We honestly appreciate all of this. Like, you guys are giving us the real right now, and I think we definitely need to hear this.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I wrote down like in my notes section, just like questions and things that I wish I asked during the interview process. And so the interviews, a lot of times I had some interviews that were literally like 20 minutes long, and that was it for that program. I had another interview day that was like almost 6 hours long. So it varies. And a lot of times before the interview, you're going to have a meet and greet too, which is optional, but it's good to go and be able to ask the residents questions. But between all of those, I've also had some interviews where they didn't ask me a single question. They just said, okay, what questions do you have? And so I think having a bunch of questions like in your back pocket can be really helpful. And so I wrote down some interview tips, just like in general. And then I wrote down some questions. If it's okay, I don't want to steal up too much of your time, but I wanted to share a couple of things. So in terms of just like general interview tips, if you have AirPods or headphones, definitely use that. I think that'll help with the sound and everything like that. Another thing is have a backup plan for technical difficulties. So a lot of times when you get these interviews, they're going to send you an email giving you like the itinerary for your interview day. They also a lot of times will include a phone number or an email to hit up if there's problems. So there was like maybe 2 interviews where the whole system completely shut down and I had to finish the interview on a phone call. But if you just jot down that phone number, you'll have that peace of mind of like, okay, if worst case scenario, something happens, I at least, know who and like what number I'm supposed to call in events of that. Another thing is to review your application beforehand. Just some of the secondary stuff, some of your hobbies, because a lot of the questions are going to come from your application. And so if you just have a general idea of because I know like once you get into the interview system or in the interview season pretty far, you aren't going to necessarily remember what all and what kind of details you put on your application. And so if you refresh yourself to see what you already talked about, you can kind of figure out like what you can go into more depth. Another thing that I have found was helpful, if you have a tendency to move around, if you're in like a swivel chair, it's super easy like when you're nervous to do this during the interview. So for my interviews, I actually swapped out like my computer chair with like a stationary like a dining room chair, so I wasn't moving as much. It's just like a little thing. Triple check your interview time. And then just to go into questions that I asked, and these are some of the things that I wish I knew, like now being a resident, wish I knew a little bit beforehand, but like shifts, how many and how long, these are questions that a lot of times you can ask in the meet and greets with the residents. More of the specifics with the shifts, like are you able to swap shifts with co-residents? What's that process? Another thing you could do is ask how they do their scheduling. Like EDs, we do a lot of night shifts or like shift work in general. And so ask if they have like a circadian rhythm scheduling. So my program, we do that. So every 3 hours, a new person comes on and they really try to do their best to, so if you start at 6A, then you'll be at 9A, then 12. And so they're not flipping you nights and days a lot. So asking like kind of those nuances about shifts. When are the schedules released? And these, I think, are like more questions that you can ask like either on your rotations and like again in the meet and greets. But I think it's also like really helpful. Another big thing is asking about handoff culture for their program. So like when a shift is wrapping up, like so in a 9-hour shift, do people pick up for 8 hours and then just do notes for 9? Are you picking up patients all the way to the end of your shift? Is there like a sign out? Like how do sign outs go usually? Another question I think that's good to ask is about moonlighting opportunities and what that looks like. Some programs will let third years completely moonlight like independently by themselves. Some will let you do it under like direct guidance. And so if that's an option, just getting a little bit more information about moonlighting, I think is cool. For ultrasound training, ask how much direction there is. Is it like, here's a probe, just scan some people in the ED, or is it more of like a directed tract with more guidance? You can ask about like if there's any specialty tracks. A lot of times this information is going to be on the website, but if you really do have an interest in like a subspecialty kind of thing, you can ask like, oh, do you have a faculty member who is interested in XYZ? For the PDs and like APDs, you can ask about, so what are your graduates doing now? You can ask like if the program has helped, or like if there's any resources like provided within the program with like finding jobs after we graduate. Let's see. Another question I think that's really telling is asking faculty, like, tell me about a time that the residents gave you feedback and change happened because of it. I think that'll tell a lot about if the program like really values the residents' opinions and how, I guess, like how dynamic and open to change they are. Another question was that I really like to ask was like, when's the last time the residency did anything fun as a group? I think that's also telling too, to see if it's a program that if they're always doing fun stuff, and what kind of activities do they do? Is it, are they always just going to bars and breweries, or are they incorporating like other fun stuff too? And then another one of the questions that I like to ask was about, does the program have any traditions? And so you can get a lot about like the culture of the program and kind of like the personality of the program and the people in it, about if they have, like every Halloween, there's like a big party that, the program director, throws or whatever. You ask about teaching and mentorship opportunities. And then just like general questions that I like to ask was like closest preferred like airport for travel, food perks at the hospital. That's huge. Those are all things that aren't always like completely listed on the website. The parking situation, if you have to pay, if it's close. And then just another thing too is like if you're going in like in a colder area, like how they treat their roads, if they plow, things like that. But that was a lot, but those were all questions that I either asked myself or like wish I asked.
I just want to chime in too. Like if you asked me about the ultrasound guidance, like I'd be very impressed, because I think that's a really intuitive question to ask. I think Molly just gave a lot of gold right now. I think another way to phrase the sign out question, because I do think it's really important to ask, is like, how long are you typically there after a shift? Because if everyone is always there 2-3 hours after a shift, then that tells you that even if they say like, oh, we stopped picking up an hour before, that they're not doing that, So if they say that, then I would follow up with like, okay, so you're generally getting out on time. And I think that they'll probably end up being pretty honest with you. But I think that a lot of what she just said is super helpful. And I think that asking about if the program director is responsive to feedback in the meet and greets is also really important. I think like your consultant relationship, how much guidance you have in rotations like that, where it is important that you have guidance. And if your program is responsive to feedback, are 3 super important things that are going to lead to your happiness that are underrated. And then, like I mentioned, the number of shifts I think is super important for me personally. But you guys got this. You're all going to do great.
Thank you so much, guys. You just gave like the best advice ever. I feel like I like have a better grip on things right now.
We cannot thank you guys enough. Honestly, we appreciate the time. People are already thanking in the chat, but we appreciate the time that you guys took out of your busy schedules. We honestly do appreciate it. This definitely has changed the game and give us kind of a foundation, at least, to approach this. So thank you guys so much. Hopefully you guys are willing to be on our future panels. We have a lot coming up. So maybe later down the line and, hopefully with your availability, because we could definitely use you guys to speak. But I just want to, on behalf of everyone, thank you guys again. You guys are amazing. We hope to be like you one day. we're working to it. So thank you guys so much. And thank you all for attending. I hope that you guys found it very useful. Normally we have a Google form for some feedback, but unfortunately it's closed and that's not something we can control right now.
I'm going to post the link anyways, just to see if it works for anyone else.
And if it does, yes. If not, maybe we'll consider emailing out to participants just to see, what you guys think of these sessions, if they're helpful for you guys, what you would change. Because again, we're doing this for us, and, Jordan and I are very much included, and Katie, we're included in this. We're a part of this as well. So thank you guys so much, honestly. I hope everybody has a good evening and best of luck, guys. We're going to kill these interviews. Now we know how to crush the interviews. This is what tonight was about. Now we know how to crush them. So thank you guys so much and have a good night, everybody.